It's the Fulhamish podcast, your independent voice of Fulham FC. My name's Sammy James. Welcome to the show. Today, we're looking ahead to that big game on Saturday, the FA Cup quarter-final against Crystal Palace at Craven Cottage. One win away from our first trip to Wembley in the Cup since 1975, which sounds mad. Our first FA Cup semi-final since 2002. It would be a monumental achievement. Also, we'll do a roundup of Fulham players on international duty, and we've got some emails at the end, as always. I'm joined by Jack Collins. Hello.
Hello, Sammy. How's it going?
Good, thank you. How was your international break?
Yeah, I mean, busy. Obviously, been trying to keep abreast of all the things, and club football hasn't really slept either. You know, there's been all of the news about Trent Alexander-Arnold. There's been Thiago Motta being sacked by Juventus. It's been a very busy break, I think, for a lot of the world of football. So it hasn't been too restful, but I'm glad to be coming back towards club football again this weekend.
Yeah, I had a little trip to Porto.
Yeah, I saw this. How come?
Well, there was a stag do there. So
Nice.
one of my best mates, Ollie, had a stag do in Porto. Obviously, that's where you're getting married this summer.
It is, indeed.
So I've done a
You've done a recce.
I've done a recce.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate it.
For you of Porto. I checked out a lot of bars.
Did you like it?
I loved it.
It's great to see.
I have drunk more than enough Superboc to last me a lifetime.
I've got bad news for you. Bad news for you. But alas, we'll deal with that. Did you have anything else? Do you have any other fun drinks? My favourite Porto drink is a port and tonic, which is white port with tonic water. And it's unreal.
I did do a port tour, which in about an hour and a half included 10 glasses of port.
It's good going.
Yeah. I
That
never
sounds a bit like the first hour and a half of my wedding, hopefully.
Can't wait.
See how we go.
Yeah, I learned a lot on the Ports tour. Yeah, very, very nice. And I did a lap around the Dragao as well.
Fantastic. What a stadium, by the way.
What a ground. I mean, one of those that if they built it in the UK would just be really cold and freezing. But it works out there, right? Because it's so open.
The back of it just doesn't really exist. It's just like just air. And so you can stand at the back and people just like sit there and smoke and stuff. It's bizarre as a kind of idea, but it works.
Yeah. Right, let's do a little bit of an international roundup. First of all, we'll talk about Raul Jimenez in Mexico. That was the headline. However, I will say that the first episode of Full America is out, and I joined the regular hosts, Charlie, Kip and Ben Jarman, for this one. After that, I'm staying out of it, and the whole UK, everyone from the UK is banned from going on Full America. It's North American only, but I broke the rules for the first one.
What about if we're in America?
Yeah, I can accept that.
Fine. Just flying to New York just to go on Full America.
Yeah.
Exciting times. Can't wait.
So we talked a lot about Raul Jimenez and the impact of that and potentially whether he might be the starting striker for Mexico in 2026. So if you want more on that, then do go back, listen back to our very first Full America episode. But we'd be remiss to do an international roundup and not talk about it. The clear headliner from a Fulham standpoint. He is going to be bouncing after that. And later on, we'll come on to the discussion of whether him or Rodrigo Muniz should start up front. But it's probably got to be taken into consideration that he will be on cloud 9 because he was the best player.
Yeah, he was unbelievable. I mean, he won player of the tournament. Sometimes that doesn't reflect actually what's happened. In this case, it very much did. He was the star of the show. And what I loved about this was a couple of things. But the 4 goals he scores are completely different. They couldn't be more different goals. There's obviously the penalty that ends up winning the tournament. There's the free kick, which everyone would have seen by now, which is stunning. Absolutely stunning free kick. There's also a header, a really good header as well, and like a slotted finish for the first goal against Canada. So when you're looking at it in that perspective, that's what you want from a striker, right? You want a striker who's able to score from a number of different situations. And it's just lovely to see him in that kind of form of vein of form and confidence that he is very much in right now. And you know, we've seen this, I think, from performances over the course of the season, right? That doesn't mean that Raul's been perfect throughout this season. He hasn't. But I think that his work rate, his ability to drop deep and create things, his link-up play, all of which have been integral to the way that Fulham have worked this season, were all on full display here. And as you say, 2 years ago, it looked like Mexico were trying to phase Raul out. And, to an extent, reasonably so, right? Considering what had happened and considering the football and the level that he was playing at that time. The recovery to his top level has been stunning. And this was Raul manifest in so many different ways. I loved the penalty. And I was watching it thinking, the penalty gets given. It's a really weird handball that it gets given for. I'm not sure what on earth the Panama player is doing at that moment. But it's the 92nd minute, I think. And this penalty gets given. You're just like, well, Mexico have won. Like, Raul is obviously going to score here. When's the last time Fulham had a penalty takeaway that every time they stepped up to the spot, you were like, no worries. Not worried at all. And I'm sure he'll now miss a penalty against Palace because I've said this. But like, I have no fear whatsoever when he steps up to the spot he's going to miss. And he does this thing, we were talking about this on Ranks actually. He does this thing where he changes the angle of his foot as he hits it. And sometimes you look at a keeper diving and you're like, well, you've just guessed, right? That doesn't happen in the rest of football. You've just guessed what's going on there. But actually, the way that the keeper dives is correct, considering the way that Raul runs up. But he just switches his angle and flicks it into the opposite corner. It's unbelievable. They're like wherewithal to be able to do that on the spur of the moment in the run-up. Just very, very impressed. What a performance. And rightly crowned player of the tournament and rightly Mexico Nations League champions.
I mean, I don't love mentioning him or that club on this podcast. Is there an element of Ivan Toney about it?
Kind of. I think Tony's thing was he waited so long that the keeper basically felt like they had to dive. It was a little bit... His penalty technique is not a million miles dissimilar, not in terms of style, but in terms of the way that they make the keeper move to what Jorginho's used to be with that hop run-up. I don't think Raul's is quite that. He just literally can change the angle on a sixpence. Tony's one was more kind of just he actually waited and then just pushed past it home. And I think that is, one, intriguing. I've never seen anyone take a penalty like that, I don't think. But two, it's working every single time right now. And he creates such power from such a short drawback that even if the keeper did hold their ground and wait, it's very difficult to get down to it because he's hitting it with such force. And I think that's what makes it really impressive.
For the rest of the international roundup, I think I want to go through it, but with the lens, slightly different lens. Often we're celebrating great Fulham performances on international duty. But I think one thing that I'm really nervous about this Palace game for lots of reasons, because Palace are good, is our record after the international breaks. Which is pretty atrocious. We, I think, won one game last season, which was the Luton game, where we weren't brilliant. Our record post-international break is poor, just to say the least. Ever since Marcus Silva joined, right? You can put it back to that very, very first post-international break game that he had away at Blackpool, a team that the Championship Fulham should have dominated.
Walked all over, yeah.
And we went and lost it, right? Yep. It's been a thing since the start of Marco Silva. What I am maybe hoping for in this is that, to me, it feels like an international break where we might have been given a little bit of quite good fortune in terms of the scheduling for this Palace game. Now, Palace probably might have had the same luck as well. But I'm interested to know how this is going to affect the Fulham first team. So I thought we could just go player by player, and we can say if they played well or whatever. But we can also just be like, how many players did or didn't go on international breaks. So,
yeah, just to kind of look at that more holistically quickly before we go player by player, one of the things I think has hurt us often is that the South American contingent, so obviously Andreas in particular in this, plus the American and Mexican contingent, have often been playing on like the Tuesday before we've played. And, you know, they'll get back to camp, and now I'm in international mode. They'll get back to Fulham on a Thursday, and then suddenly we'll be playing Saturday or Sunday, right? And actually the scheduling was one of the things we talked about around the USMNT this break, but the scheduling has moved forward. It meant that there was almost no time between, you know, players arriving at camp for Mexico and for the US in particular. And obviously Andres didn't go off with Brazil this time, which would have been a help, I think, in terms of this. But they went in and they played a game, it was Friday, Thursday, you know, it was in that kind of mix for us here in the UK at the very least. So by the time that it's done, and obviously Anthony Robinson drops out of the USMNT camp, which again is probably a good thing from a Fulham perspective, Raul would have been back, you know, today as we record this on Wednesday. He would have been back Tuesday, Wednesday.
Let's go through this player by player and try and work that out. Because as you say, I think there are a few instances where we've been given a stroke of luck here. I think we've talked about the reasons why we struggle after international breaks. It's the way that Marco meticulously sets his team up for each opposition, and quite clearly when he has international break, when he's got to give them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, in some cases Thursday off, he doesn't have
Doesn't
that
quite
time on the
land,
training pitch. I think we're all fairly agreed that that is probably why, although I would caveat this, and I had this debate with my dad, that sometimes I think the sample of Fulham post-international break is a fairly small sample size to draw a huge amount of conclusions. But there's no doubt that there has been a trend of some
There's a
sort.
pattern, right?
So let's go position by position. Leno, no international.
Didn't go
on internationals. Timmy Castagna, right back. Now I looked, Belgium beat Ukraine in the Nations League.
Yeah, he played left back actually. He played really well in the
Only in
win.
the second game though he played, I
Yeah.
noticed. In the first game he was given a rest, which I think if there's one player in this squad that we're worried about fitness for and tiredness, and especially who is going to have a super important role against Crystal Palace, it is Timmy Castagna. But he played 90 minutes in a big 3-0 win.
Yeah, and played very well from left back. I thought did a very good job in what was a very comprehensive Belgian performance. So
And this was on Tuesday, right?
this was on Tuesday, so he'll be back in camp. by
He's one of
Wednesday.
he's one of the ones to be a bit concerned about though, if we're thinking, okay, he's not going to have a huge amount of preparation time.
Yes, exactly. Although I would imagine he'd be back by Wednesday.
Yes, at least the travel element isn't too far. Joachim Andersen, he played Sunday, scored an amazing own goal.
Yes, very, very funny. I imagine you were in Portugal. At
I
this
was
point.
in Porto Airport as that goal went in, much to the delight of everyone in the airport, and I was like, oh, Joachim. I mean, bit of a basketball game, wasn't there?
Yeah, weird kind of international break from a Denmark perspective, because they were really good in the first game and should have been more than 1-0 up, and then they concede 5, obviously over 120 minutes. In the second, he's at fault obviously for the own goal, but he's not hugely at fault for loads else. So it's hard to sit there and say he had a good game when they conceded 5.
Yeah.
But I didn't think it was anything to be hugely worried about. I would have had more problems with his centre-back partner, who I just don't think is very good in Vestergaard.
Yeah. Calvin Bassey played both games for Nigeria.
And the second was on Tuesday.
Yeah. So this is, again, possibly concerning position, but we know that Bassey will play. There's no doubt about that.
Bassey feels like one of those players that just can keep going. He's not someone we've had, touch wood, any huge issues with in terms of injuries this season. He's never really looked like he was out of puff. He's not one of those players that I have concerns about. Sometimes you see a player and you're like, oh, they don't look fully on it. Bassey isn't really one of those players, is he?
Yeah.
So I'm less concerned about this one, although Nigeria will be super disheartened by that 1-1 draw that they had in their second game. They conceded a 90th minute equaliser after Iwobi had been subbed off, actually, which has really, really hurt their chances of qualification. So that would be a bit down, I would suggest.
Yeah. Left back, Anthony Robinson. Now, he didn't travel or play, although it was because of an injury-related reason he was resting himself.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure about this one, because I think that there is a
tendinopathy, that's it.
I think there's a long-term thing that's going on with Anthony Robinson. I think he is managing injuries, but so far so good in terms of the way that he has managed them, right? And I think, look, if he was fully fit, he would have gone. So there should be concern that it's not something that we should bypass and be like, oh, he just hasn't gone to international camp. He's a player that loves playing for his country, and very much would have been there in, an opportunity to win silverware as well. This wasn't just a couple of friendlies and a break. So I think there is slight concern that Anthony Robinson's injury might be something that we need to keep an eye on. But it did feel like this was something kind of precautionary as opposed to reactionary. And I think that's a good thing, because he'd played 90 minutes pretty comfortably the weekend before.
Yeah, and he didn't look in that Spurs game like he was struggling. The way he skinned 2 players in like the 85th minute, I think it was, certainly didn't look like a player that was struggling too much. But yeah, he did an Instagram story, said, I've been struggling with tendinopathy for a few months now. It's increasingly difficult to manage. After consulting with both medical teams, with the quick turnaround of the Nations League games, I don't think I could have contributed to the team at a good enough level. And this is probably the only opportunity to try and get on top of the issue, finish the season strong and give myself the best chance of being back with the US this summer in much better shape, ready for another big tournament. Wishing the lads luck, etc., etc. So my hope from that mess, I saw it was obviously like, oh, okay, that's not great, but without being an expert on what tendinopathy really entails, I don't think it's something to be hugely concerned about.
No, I think it's a manageable issue, but it's one of those you just have to keep aware of, I think. So, yeah, I mean, slight question marks, but I think we'll probably be all right with Anthony Robinson.
Both of our kind of double pivot in midfield played most minutes. I think Sander Berge played full 90 both times for Norway. Looked very good. They have two great wins.
Brilliant. Quality of opposition, pinch of salt, etc.
Moldova.
The Moldova game, he played as a solo defensive midfielder with just 5 attackers in front of him, and he was just like, cool. We've given Brighton a bit for that Jack Hinchelwood thing.
Yeah.
Like, he basically did that, although there was no waves of attack coming at him because it was one-way traffic. But I thought he managed the game really, really nicely. And then in their game against Israel, he was back into a sort of double pivot, but Patrick Berg played alongside him, who plays for Bodo Glimt, and is a slightly more attack-minded midfielder. Not miles off, actually, the Sasha Lukic kind of mould of players. So there were 2 very good performances. The Israel game in particular, I thought he ran the middle of the park really, really nicely. The Moldova game, he didn't have huge amounts to do defensively, but kept things ticking. But I was impressed with both performances from Sander.
Yeah, he hasn't been playing a lot of football lately, though. With 290 minutes plus he's been playing pretty much ever present for Fulham and not been getting a lot of substitutions, yeah. Sasa Lukic, on the other hand, played his first football in ages.
Yeah, because I think this is good.
Yeah, he hasn't played since Wolves away, where he picked up that 10th yellow card and then he missed. He didn't. He played then against United, obviously, because that was a cup match. But then he didn't play against Brighton, didn't play against Spurs. So probably actually one of the few players that we wanted to get some minutes. And I saw in both games he came off kind of like 75 to 80.
Yeah, and again another good job in midfield. It's been a good international break for Serbia. They were without Alexander Mitrovic, who continues to recover from that heart arrhythmia, obviously well. But they did the job. They stayed in League A. They won their playoff. A job done from a Sasha perspective, and it was good. I think 75 minutes in both games was absolutely perfect from what I wanted from Sasha, so happy with that one.
And then moving up the pitch, we're running out of players that played internationally. So obviously Alex Iwobi did, you mentioned that. He got substituted in both games, but played the majority of the games for
He was really good in the first
Nigeria.
game. In the second game, they were less effective and obviously got punished late, but it didn't do much wrong.
He's another one, though, that I would have preferred to have fewer minutes in this. He's up there with Timmy Castagna as a player who has looked leggy for a while and ideally could have done with a little bit of a break, but
alas, we are where we are.
Obviously, neither Andreas nor Emil Smith-Rowe, depending on who plays on Saturday, and that'll be a debate for later in the pod, were called up for international break.
Brazil could have done with Andreas. They lacked any sort of industry in the middle of the pitch. They were spanked by Argentina.
Kind of surprised to see, given that I think Andreas has been performing quite well in the last couple of months. That I didn't know if there was a reason he didn't go or just...
Well, I think he dropped out for Neymar, and then Neymar dropped out and they brought Endrick in instead, which didn't really make any sense to me because it felt like that team was top-loaded anyway. But, a decision. I don't think that Dorival Jr. is going to be making many more decisions as Brazil manager because I imagine he will be out quite quickly after getting thumped by Argentina.
And then, obviously, on the right, Adama doesn't play for Spain and Rodrigo Muniz doesn't play for Brazil.
Yet.
Well, yeah, they give him time. And Raul Jimenez, we talked about, obviously not ideal, Raul playing so much football in a sense, but I think probably it's definitely a net positive for the fact that he absolutely bossed it. So from that sense, international-wise, and I looked at Crystal Palace a little bit as well. I mean, it's not like they didn't have players playing on Tuesday either. Obviously, I think Munoz and Jefferson Lerma both played for Colombia on Tuesday. But I think for me, actually, it's not necessarily a fitness. It's never been a fitness problem for Fulham. The fact that we play on international duty, I don't necessarily think it's, oh, great, Crystal Palace had loads of international players. I think it's simply a preparation thing in terms of Marco. Yeah,
and I think the scheduling's been kinder this time. Now, whether that ends up working for us or not, we shall see. But let's see if these theories are correct, if we can kind of, all we're doing is speculating to an extent here. So I would imagine it's correct, and imagine that makes the most sense as being the most obvious theory as to why these things don't quite work in the same way when we get back from the international break. Perhaps the scheduling helps a little bit that time.
Yeah. All right, we will take a break there. Afterwards, we'll look ahead to Saturday. Part 2 of the Fulhamish podcast. It is Sammy here with Jack Collins. If you're heading to the Palace game on Saturday, make sure you check out Craft Beer Co. in Hammersmith. I normally say a beautiful place for a pre or post-match beer. given that it's a 12:15 kickoff, I think you might be struggling to get to Craft Beer Co for a pre-match beer, but it does mean you have loads of the afternoon for a post-match beer. So whether we're celebrating a Wembley appearance or drowning our sorrows, there is no finer place to do it than at Craft Beer Co, a beautiful family-run pub in Hammersmith, right in Hammersmith Broadway Station as well. So you can pop there after the game, and then you've got all the tube lines to take you wherever you want in London town. Hopefully, to celebrate, Jack, a Wembley semi-final. We can dream. Fulham versus Palace, 12:15, the first quarter-final of the weekend. And I was asking the question, I put it on the Fulhamish pod, Twitter and Instagram, and I just simply said, is this the biggest match of Marco Silva's tenure? And before I read out what some of our listeners said, what do you think?
Probably. On kind of paper, yes. I mean, there are moments in certain bits, and I would suggest that the game that obviously won us the championship felt like a big moment. The game that got us promoted that first year felt like a big moment. But in terms of our Premier League tenure, you would say that this probably stands out as the best opportunity to potentially, one, obviously get to Wembley, but two, to potentially win silverware, potentially get back into Europe. There are so many different things that hang on this game. So I would say that the answer is probably yes. Is it the most like emotionally invested game that I've been in since he's been here? Probably not. Like, you know,
Really?
I don't know. I always think that first game back against Brentford, the 3-2 win with the Mitrovic header, is the most emotionally invested I've been in a game.
But Fulham could have lost that game and like everything. It's just another game. It is just another game.
Yeah,
obviously
no,
it was.
It didn't feel like another game. That felt massive. I don't
It
know.
was, man.
why.
I'm not dismissing it. Like, obviously, it was a great win. I want to, you want to win every game.
No, I know, but I just felt like I think the way sometimes, when you I think back to the playoff finals and things like that, right? And like you wake up in the morning with the weight of expectation on your shoulders, right? I woke up like that day of the Brentford game. I don't know why, and maybe it's a personal thing. That's fine as well. But like for me, that game carried such significance because it felt like, obviously that first season up, we were like, we're not sure if we're going to be able to, we're coming off the back of this bouncing around period. We're feeling better and stronger this year. We'd had a decent start. And then you kind of come to this game and you're like, well, this is a good barometer of whether we're going to be able to survive or not. And the way that it panned out, all of it, I just felt very emotionally invested in that game. So in terms of that, I think that probably for me stands out as one that I was particularly on. But on paper, from like a general and holistic perspective, this is, yes, I think the biggest game of his tenure.
Yeah, I just think it's those opportunities, right? And we got to a semi-final last year, so you could argue that maybe the second leg against Liverpool was. But I think the difference that game was I didn't go into either of those legs thinking Fulham really had that much of a chance.
Yeah.
It was an all-conquering Liverpool side, and you're just not the favourites, right? You're facing Liverpool, the opportunity was there, and it was a big match. This is one where you're like, you've got a puncher's chance here of reaching a semi-final
I use
at
it
Wembley.
50-50, right? Like, and I'd say this to anyone that's kind of talking about the game. If we're discussing this game even from a try and step back from our own innate biases perspective, I think that a Palace fan will probably tell you this is 50-50 too, right? Yes, they've been good away from home. Yes, they've beaten us already at the Cottage this season. But I think you come into this game on a kind of fresh slate in some ways. And I think both teams have a chance going through. I said this when the draw was made, right? But to neutrals, I think that they won't really care who goes through between Palace and Fulham.
Yeah.
But I think that they will look at that and be like, oh, it'd be cool to see either of those sides in the semi-finals of the FA Cup. And so from that perspective, there's not if Fulham were playing City, for example, in this game, like, I think every neutral would want Fulham to win. But actually, in this regard, there's a reason why people are like, oh, cool, because it is a pretty well-balanced tie. It's two teams who are of a similar caliber. I think, across the course of this season, across the games we've played, it would suggest to us that this is pretty much 50-50 on the nose. So I think you're right in terms of it feels like an opportunity and a game that is winnable. That's not to say we will win it, but it's a game that is winnable.
Yeah. I mean, some comments here. I mean, generally, people are saying yes. Joe O'Brien, 100% with how the cup has opened up. It's a real opportunity to win it. 100% till we get to the final. We can't be performing badly at any stage. 100%. There's not a team in the competition left that we should be afraid of. And here for the Fulham, which is actually Avas said, with what's at stake, absolutely. Taking this club to an FA Cup semi-final and potentially beyond would be monumental considering our recent history and would really cement him within Fulham folklore. 3 cup wins away from a statue.
Did anyone say no?
Yes. Yanis said no.
What did Yanis say?
Just the words no.
No. Fair enough, Yanis.
Oh, and LPL said yes, actually no, the semi-final will be.
Okay, all right. Well, that's okay. So
And
that's
actually,
that's a yes.
And then random Fulham stuff said it'll be the 500th game of his managerial career too.
Wow. There you go.
So that could be serendipity.
The omens are good.
I think.
Are they? I don't know.
I have no idea if the omens are good. Look, let's talk a bit about Crystal Palace. Weird season they've had.
Yeah.
You know, they're 6 points behind Fulham in the table, but have a game in hand. That game in hand would have been against Newcastle at home, so not easy, but also very winnable. So
They don't win at home. They only win away, which is completely useless for us this week.
Could, in theory, be within about 3 points of us. But when you consider that Palace, I think maybe it wasn't until their 8th or 9th game that they won a game, were absolutely rancid for the first probably 11 or 12, and that includes the 2-0 defeat by
Against
us.
Yeah.
It's quite an indicator of how good Palace are at the moment, because if they're only just below us and they had that terrible start and we had a pretty decent start, I think it shows. We all thought at the beginning of the season that Palace might be swimming in similar kind of circles to Fulham in terms of position in the table. I remember we did previews and we all kind of rated Fulham's chances of, if not being in the top half, very close to the top half pretty highly. I think we all predicted that Palace would either be a little bit better than us or very, very near. I think we are now starting to see the Palace that we all predicted would come at the end of last season when they were terrific. It was just so odd how they started the season. Injuries obviously got the better of them. They struggled to adapt to a few new players, Maxime Lacroix being one of them. But now they've pretty much all started to click.
Yeah, I mean, I think in 2025 only Liverpool have taken more points than Palace. It might be Liverpool and Brighton, but it's very much up there, right?
Yeah.
So they're in that conversation in terms of how good they've been since the turn of the year. They've been phenomenal, and you know they come into this game in a really rich vein of form. They come into it knowing that their away record has been absolutely sublime since the turn of the year, and all of those things will play into their favour. You know, plus the fact that they came and turned Fulham over relatively comfortably, we should add, a couple of weeks ago. So all of those things suggest that we're coming up against a good side here, right, in Palace. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Fulham should win this game. You know, I think, as I said before, I think this is 50-50, and I think that you look at it and think, well, home advantage should normally play into your favour. You know, that would normally maybe swing the odds between these two teams. But actually, I don't think it does, because Palace have been so good away from home. So, you know, what that means is that we talk about games and readiness, etc. I'm not excited for this.
No.
Like,
I'm stressed.
I feel a bit sick when I think about it, to be perfectly honest with you, because it is such an opportunity, and it is, you know, that chance to get, I was going to say back to Wembley, but to Wembley in a different context, we should probably say. And yet, there in front of us, there is a side who I very much admire, and who I think are doing a wonderful job at working the bits out that had plagued them towards the start of the season. So, you know, Ollie Glasner been talked about this week as a potential Leipzig manager. Palace moving to sign him to a new contract to try and avoid any issues surrounding that. I'm not surprised by that. You know, you look at what's happened with a variety of clubs in Germany, and you see what Glasner has done there. And in the same way that I'm sure that Silva is getting covetous looks from fans of other clubs, I would be shocked if Glasner wasn't getting the same. You know, he's a manager with real pedigree, who's gone and won the Europa League in his past, who knows how to get the best out of his teams in cup competitions, and he comes into this game in a really good nick of form. Now, I don't want any of this to sound like I'm like, oh, Palace are going to win, because I don't think that. I really do think this is a coin flip. But to say that, you know, to look at it and say that I don't respect this team, respect what Ollie Glasner's done, and actually the way that they've turned things around since a really poor start of the season, I think would be disingenuous. I
guess it's the Silva versus Glasner battle as well, isn't it? And I think overall, like Silva's come off a little bit worse in the games that we faced against him. Obviously, there was the draw at the end of last season where Palace probably should have won about 4 or 5-0.
And yet needed an absolute thunderbolt from Jeff
Yeah,
Schlupp.
very nearly lost it, of course. It was a late-minute goal for them to equalise. We did win at Selhurst Park. I still caveat that game with, I do think we deserved to win it, but we couldn't have played Palace on a better day. And I still think without that red card for Kamada, I don't know if Fulham win that game.
I think it would have been a bit nervy, but I still think we would have won the game. Like, to be fair, we put the ball in the back of the net about 5 times.
Yeah.
But
they really had our number a few weeks ago. And
yeah, they were really smart at the Cottage in the way that they played us, I thought.
I mean, Fulham were embarrassingly poor that day. Like,
yeah, it was a bad day at the office, right?
We didn't have a shot.
Mm-hmm.
And if we perform similarly on Saturday...
If we don't have a shot, we won't win.
Well, yes.
I agree.
Unless you're Burnley, that tends to be difficult.
Sorry, if we play like that, you're like, didn't have a shot. I was like, well, yeah, obviously we won't win if we don't have a shot. It's very Michael Owen of you.
Like me, I was so...
No, I was thinking, you said we didn't have a shot. If we play like that, we won't win. I was like, well, yeah, obviously.
I mean, if we play as badly as that, not necessarily, if we don't have a shot, we won't win.
Anyway.
Muppet.
Okay, fair enough. I thought that's what you were saying. I was like, well, yeah. Anyway, the point is right. The point stands. We play like that again, and Fulham have got no hope of winning this game. So it has to be different, but equally, you look at the performances, around that. You look at the Spurs game, which was very impressive, I think, at the Cottage. And yes, we've had Spurs' number for a little while at the Cottage now, but you look at that and you think, oh, this is an opportunity to go out and take our game to them. And what I thought Palace did really well against us the other week was they funneled us into positions we just didn't want to be in, right? So there was no ability to break through the centre. They just slung us wide and basically was like, go on then, sling the ball into the box. We will head it away. And that's exactly what they did. And they sat there, they had a deep block. They broke really well. They broke really efficiently in terms of counter-attacking football. And when Fulham dropped off the pace, Palace seized advantage of the game. And it could have been 2-0 earlier than it actually was. But it ended up with that second goal anyway. So you kind of look at it and think, well, that's a game plan that they put in there to stifle this Fulham team. Now it's on Marco Silva to come up with something that's going to be able to break down that game plan and be able to actually open Palace up, and then Glasner will have to respond, right? So I assume he is not going to think that Fulham will play exactly the same way, because that would be madness. But actually, when you kind of look at it and think, okay, so where is this won and lost? We can talk about individual duels all you like, but actually the answer might well be here in the tactical setups that Silva and Glasner go with.
So I'm looking at the team from that day that we lost to Palace. So pretty much it was, back four as usual. Lukic and Berger played. It was Adama on the right wing, Smith Rowe in the 10, Iwobi on the left, and then Jimenez up front. I remember it was obviously the week after the brilliant win over Nottingham Forest. We went into this game as high on confidence.
Full of confidence, yeah.
And Adama had a blast against Forest. He was player of the match and absolutely fantastic.
We were good at crossing that day.
Yeah, and then I think it was almost like we just tried the same thing again and it just really didn't work. It was quite a cat and mousey game in the first half, wasn't it? I remember Fulham started better first 15 minutes, had a few openings, didn't quite click for us. And then all of a sudden, I think Palace broke a few times and it was like Fulham lost belief in the game. It got wrestled away from us. Yes, it was a corner and an own goal they scored from, but it was one of those where it was like, that was coming. So we lost control of it, really. And I guess but that is, other than maybe I would, if I was looking at that starting lineup, other than I would put in Andreas for Smith Rowe, I would have exactly the same team.
Yeah, probably. I think that we have to kind of work out what it looks like from a wing perspective. Is this going to be a game for Adama? It very much wasn't the last time round. Do you want that to change and look a little bit different? Can you potentially shift a couple of players around? Does Willian start in this game? I think he probably does. I think that Willian starts here. I think this is the kind of game that Marcus Silva will turn to his experience in. And so if Willian starts on one side, do you drop Adama for Iwobi? So I think you probably drop Adama. You probably play Iwobi off the start. You go Willian and Iwobi with Andreas in the middle to give it some industry. and then you bring a Adama on to try and break your game open late if you need it. You bring a Ryan Sessegnonaince on late if you need it and need someone to kind of make a difference in those areas. So that's probably how I would play it. But I am open to the idea that Adama might start given he's been here for the entire international break, whereas Alex Iwobi has not.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, obviously, he does trust Willian. There's an element of it feels like starting Willian on the left, playing Iwobi away from his preferred position is overthinking it a tad.
I'd be a bit worried about the only thing I would say about Willian on the left is that I'm a bit concerned that Daniel Munoz is going to run us ragged down that wing. And whilst obviously I trust Anthony Robinson, there are going to be overlaps because they're playing with wing backs because that's how Palace play. And if you don't have a midfielder who's going to work back into those areas and double down on those players to make sure that it doesn't all fall apart, you can get overloaded in those spaces. That's probably the best argument, I would say, for starting Adama on one side and starting Iwobi on the other. But equally, you also do want, and as you say, Fulham are going to want to control this game. So if you want control, well, who do you play on your wings? You play the two players that don't lose the ball, right? Iwobi and Willian. They keep the ball so well that you kind of allow yourself to grow into a game and actually not be caught on the break, caught on the hop quite as much. With Adama, obviously Adama is quite a direct footballer. So when he loses the ball, there is the opportunity to counter-attack. And I think Fulham will look to try and minimise that considering what happened last time. So that's a potential kind of talking point, I suppose, around which winger pairing he selects. Because he's either going for the throat, where you start Adama and you'd be like, okay, we're going to open this game up and potentially make it a bit basketball-y and see what happens. Or you go Willian and Iwobi, and then you go, we're going to keep this very, very tight and potentially try and break it open later on.
Do you think it is Andreas for Smith Rowe, especially after he was a bit better against Spurs?
I think it has to be, considering I thought Andreas was brilliant against Spurs.
Yes.
I thought that he was sensational. And when you then bring the fact that Sasha Lukic comes back in as probably our most important player this season.
It's Lukic and Berg. There's just not even a debate, is there?
No, I don't think so. So therefore you are left with one spot. I think it would be incredibly harsh to drop Andreas after what happened against Spurs and the performance that he put in.
Then the real question is...
It's Raul for me.
But Rodrigo Muniz
was brilliant, absolutely sensational.
Scored the winner. That's a winning goal he scored. I know Sessegnonaince then came on and scored the second.
He scored the winner. He came on and he made a massive difference against tiring legs. Like, Raul didn't do anything wrong in that game. He played particularly well, just didn't really get any service. There was a reason he was upset when he got taken off, because he'd just seen the other players come in and be like, oh, I might finally get the ball into the box now. And he was like, oh, right, okay, cool.
You just took Christian Romero off.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I think off the back of what's happened with Raul over the past week, you'd be remiss not to start him in this one. And again, I think Marco will turn to experience. Like, I think he will turn to the heads he trusts in this camp. And I think he will bring on Rodrigo late on to try and make a difference. Like, I think that we've seen enough this season to suggest that Rodrigo has learned how to be an impact sub footballer, right? This was not something he was good at when he joined the club. It was not something he was even particularly good at last year. But this year, when he's come on in games, he's tended to make a difference. He holds the ball up so well. He's a physical handful. You can throw him on at 60 if, things are not going your way and really make a difference. Whereas I think with Raul, you don't get that impact off the bench. And I think that if things are going, you start him. If it's not working, you potentially, at 45, you change it. I know that's not really Marco Silva's style, but we've seen enough from Muniz, obviously, in the last few weeks to suggest that he can be a person that changes games and fixes them. I don't know if we get that same impact from Raul in the second half in the way that we would with Muniz.
Yeah. And in terms of the atmosphere on Saturday, it is a sellout. It seems like the tickets situation was sorted in the end.
Yeah, no, to be fair and credit where it's due, it did seem to just sort itself out.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of I still haven't quite worked out. We did have a couple of emails.
I find it weird that the seats are like, that lots of people are just be sitting in different seats whilst their own season ticket seats are now going to be filled by other people. Like, I mean, it's fine, like, it's filled, and that's the main thing, right? But it is weird that, like, people are going to be just much lower down or, like, in different places to what they normally are because people just couldn't work out the system, including me.
Yeah, I mean, we had an email from Anthony who he talked about FA Cup ticket hysteria And he wasn't just blaming Fulhamish, but he said that there was lots of podcasts and Twitter accounts who made a big song and dance over the club's handling of the ticket sales, and then it actually turned out it was a weird one. We did this podcast 2 weeks ago. We said, what a mess the club have made of this. There's no tickets left. All the Putney End season ticket holders aren't going to be able to get a game.
And then they opened a bit at the Putney End. That was weird too.
But then also, suddenly, it seemed like at the end of the week, there was loads of tickets. We're not selling out the game. Palace fans were taking screenshots of the tickets and calling us tin pot because we can't sell out a quarter final. And then I was like, wow, this is really weird. And then all of a sudden it was sold out, and then they had to reopen parts of the Putney End. It feels to me like, look, maybe
that doesn't scream to me very well managed. I'll be honest.
Yeah, and I actually responded to Anthony's email here, which I paraphrased, but basically he said that there was no real scarcity of tickets and it brought people into a panic. And I was like, fair enough. But also the Fulham Supporters Trust sent that letter where they were concerned, and the club changed their ticket policy because of it. So,
no, but also, like, when I went on to get tickets for this game, there were like 12 tickets left in the Hammersmith end. So obviously you panic. Like that's not to say that Anthony's wrong here. Like, he's clearly not. Like, there have been tickets, and pretty much everyone I know who needs a ticket has got a ticket, right? So like, I agree that perhaps it was blown out, but I shouldn't have had to been going on there 10 minutes after the tickets went on sale and be like, oh my God, if I don't buy them now, like, I'm not going to get a ticket to this game because it was so badly advertised. That doesn't change the fact that it was badly put together in terms of a system. Yes, okay, it has worked out, and credit where it's due. And I know the club like that drop-down ticket system, that they kind of secondary markets within Fulham fans themselves, and they will find a home. I appreciate it. But like mass panic is probably a stretch, but I panicked going onto that ticket. And so I hadn't even, because the thing was so badly advertised in terms of getting your own season ticket seat, that you're like, oh God, and then where's my seat? Oh, I'm just going to have to buy these at the bottom of the Hammersmith end because there's nothing else left. I won't get a ticket. And those are the things that I think that's not good for fans. That's not enjoyable for anybody. And now those people are just not in the seats that they would preferably be in as well. So yes, I take the point that maybe it went a little bit over the top, but I also would not walk back the idea that I think this was badly managed.
No, and the fact that there was a change in the policy, it all seemed quite hurried. They responded pretty aggressively to a good email from Fulham Supporters Trust. It did seem like there must be some reason why they were so panicked. I have no idea how it suddenly went from being basically sold out, it seemed like, to we can't shift the tickets, and then all of a sudden we've had to open up tickets in the Putney End. Everyone's got a ticket that I know of that wanted to go to this game. I haven't heard of anyone that can't go to this game, and that's important. That's great. And look, and the decision as well to not give Crystal Palace the entire Putney End and keep some of those back for, we hope, Fulham fans. There was a lot of chat from some Palace fans who claim they bought a membership. My personal feeling is I think it's going to be overblown. There will be one or two idiots that have done it. There always is. I don't think this is going to be like the Manchester United game or anything like that. I think everyone will go on Saturday, and other than one or two isolated incidents, it will be Fulham fans occupying the whole of.
We live in hope.
It was the same before the Aston Villa playoff game, where it was claimed that there was going to be thousands of Aston Villa fans in the Fulham end, and then there was an entire white wall where not a single person wasn't wearing white. So I think sometimes social media can overblow these things a little bit. I'm glad though that everyone's got a ticket. In terms of the atmosphere, Jack, it does feel like it has the potential to be an all-timer. It's going to be nice weather. 12:15 is not ideal.
No.
But I think everyone will just make the best of it.
I think it's not ideal, but it's also fine, isn't it? Midday sunshine, like you'd expect.
It's not going to feel like your average 12:30 kickoff. Everyone's going to be much, much more up for it.
Yeah, I think it's I actually don't mind the kickoff time. I think it will be quite fun. And look, if things go well, what an afternoon we're all going to have, right? Like, what an afternoon on it we'll all be putting together. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be amazing. I think that the atmosphere is going to be rocking. I've seen some bits and bobs on the Fulham Facebook page about a tifo, a banner that's potentially going up in the Hammersmith end as well. So it feels like everyone's on the same page, on the same wavelength for this one. And hopefully that can carry this team to victory into Wembley.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the fact that we haven't had an FA Cup semi-final since 2002.
Where was that? Villa Park?
That was Villa Park, yeah. and that John Terry.
No, we don't want to talk about it.
We don't want to talk about it.
Nope.
And Wow. I mean, it could be amazing. Let's do a couple of emails before we finish. Edward Clark wants to talk about Raul. Hi team, after watching Raul banging 2 goals for Mexico, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on his current contract situation, currently set to expire in the summer. Ever since Mitrovic left, there's been calls for the signing of a marquee striker to fill that void, but might that money be better spent in other positions if we were simply to extend Raul instead? This feels like quite a big question for now, like what do we do in the summer? I mean, I think, first of all, I would say, for me, this question isn't should Fulham sign a marquee striker in the summer, it's should we extend Raul's contract? For me, that's a no-brainer.
I believe that Fulham have an option.
Okay.
So I think that both on Adama and Raul, Fulham have an option to extend them both by a single year. And I think that will be exercised whatever happens next, right? Like that feels like the kind of thing that is going to be naturally coming to its occurrence. The question, I suppose, with both of them is, do you actually offer them more than a single year deal? Now, maybe that sounds a bit mad considering where Raul is in his career and what age he is, but equally you have to remember that he had an extended break from football, not because he wanted to, let's be very clear, but he had an extended break from football over that period of the injury, which we often talk on ranks, actually. This is quite an interesting thing about rings in the legs rather than a player's age.
Yeah.
So if a player started at 16 and they started playing regular football, Rafael Varane was someone we always talked about. Rafael Varane was cooked by 30 because he'd been playing senior men's football 30 games a year since he was 16 years old.
And that's the Raheem Sterling argument, right?
Raul has had periods in his career where he has not been quite as busy, and obviously there is the injury related, but also he was a tad of a late bloomer as well. So, those early days at Benfica, etc., it wasn't all like he was playing week in, week out. So in terms of those rings in the legs, he's probably a little bit younger from a footballing perspective than he actually is, from an age perspective. And I know this sounds a bit ridiculous and theoretical, but I would look at probably giving Raul a 2-year. Because I think that there is going to come a point where Marco decides that Muniz is the number 9 and he's the guy that he's going to believe in. But I think you have a player here in Raul who has been there, done it, and seen a lot, who is still able to guide this. And look, it's one of the things that I think we can talk about this year in terms of Marco's management. Muniz's purple patch, in inverted commas, last season was really, really impressive. But there was always a sense that if he didn't start the season well, then it was going to be a little bit iffy. And I think Marco's managed it really nicely in terms of giving Raul basically the shirt and saying, okay, it's your shirt. Rodrigo, we still believe in you. We've given you the 9. We think you're the guy, but you're not quite there yet. But we are going to continue to give you these minutes and make you feel comfortable and get you into a space where you can explode at some point in your career. And allowing Raul to continue to be his sort of mentor figure, but also someone that he rotates with and has to compete with minutes for, I think is a really nice look. I think I would potentially give him a 2-year.
Okay. This one from John Conte, I believe. Hello, Fulhamish. What a time to be alive. Not only could Fulham find themselves in Europe, they could, dare to dream, find themselves in the Champions League. Go one step at a time. We're talking about the FA Cup semi-final. We're not going
to be in the Champions League. We'll just make it clear.
3 points off.
As opposed, I don't really want to, I know that Jack Kelly famously once said, what's the point being alive
the
if you can't dream?
I
don't want to be in the Champions League, but 2, like...
You don't want to be in the Champions League?
No, if you offered me the Champions League or the Conference League right now, I would take the Conference League right now. I would snap your hand off for it. We'd win the Conference League.
Might win the Champions League.
That's quite enough. That's such an opportunity.
Come on, man.
That's such an opportunity. I want to go to Borac Banja Luka. I do not want to go to the Bernabeu. I've been to the Bernabeu loads of times.
Yaz is about to walk out.
I want to go see Borac Banja Luka against Fulham. I want to go to Riga in the depths of winter.
I want to go to the San Siro, you absolute goon.
Nah. Take me to a competition we can win. The Conference League is so much fun.
We'll go play in the Johnson's Paint Trophy.
No, you can't do that. It's illegal. You can't do that. This is such a...
Let's get relegated 3 times.
It's such an opportunity to go to the Conference League. That is a competition.
I want to be in the Conference League too, but if you gave me the choice right now, red pill or blue pill, and one of them's the Champions League, one is the Conference League.
If you give me the blue pill Champions League, the green pill Conference League, I'm taking that green pill every day of the week. And then I'm taking the orange pill after that to go to the Europa League. And finally, I would take the Champions League pill.
You're never going to... The pill's not going to be on offer. You take the best pill.
I tell you what, you've seen teams in the Champions League. You saw, Villa's drop off this year hasn't been as a start, but Newcastle's last year. Newcastle have far more depth than we do.
Don't get me wrong. It's an illogical choice. I realise that it's going to be bad for us, but the opportunity to go to like Dortmund or Milan or I was going to say the Nou Camp, but maybe not next season. But the Bernabeu.
Nou Camp's going to be back next season.
Oh, okay, then brilliant. We're going to be the first team to go, English teams to go play at the Camp Nou. Like, come on.
Nah, take me to a league that we can compete in.
Anyway, that wasn't his question. With all of this in front of us, I don't want to think too much about next season. However, I wanted to ask the question, with Marco's success helping talented players refine their form, could we be looking at a Ryan Sessegnon renaissance or a Sessegnonaince next season? Obviously, we haven't really talked too much about the Spurs game and that Ryan Sessegnon moment.
We did in a live show.
Well, yes, we did a live show. Drink it in. My opinion hasn't changed. Assess. I kind of said it a little bit at the live show. I think there is an incredible attacking player in there. That's where I see him. Where his position will always be a difficult one. He isn't a left winger. He's not a left back. He's not really a left wing back. No one really understands where Sessegnon plays. But, and I don't know how this works into a starting 11. That's really, really difficult. But if Fulham are 1-0 down this Saturday, I want Ryan Sessegnon on the pitch.
Yeah.
That's my thing. And I felt like it was that Palace game a couple of weeks. We couldn't buy a shot and Sessegnon was just sitting there. And the man will find space and he will create a chance every single time.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's a good point in the question. I think that we will see a Ryan Sessegnon that continues to develop.
A Sessegnonaince.
A seance. That as he continues to push forwards and re-find his feet. And again, another one that Marco's managed really, really well, I think, in terms of, making sure that he was held back a little bit because he wasn't ready to deliver what I think there was a grand expectation around his return. And now we're starting to see the rewards of that. The bulking up that we've seen from him that I think happened mostly at Spurs, but he's continued to show that strength and develop that side of his game. I think there is a position for him. I'm not 100% sure. I'm with you. I'm not 100% sure where it is yet. I'm not exactly sure what role he fulfills within the team. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if we're sitting here in December and Ryan Sessegnon has played, half the minutes available to Fulham.
Yeah. This one from Toby Ward-Smith, really likes this email. Hi Fulhamish, long-term listener, first-time emailer. I've been thinking about this for a while and really picked up on it more than ever today at the Spurs game. What has happened to the level of quality halftime entertainment? For some reason, all we ever seem to have now are interviews that you can just about hear over the PA system. Gone are the days of kids doing halftime penalty shootouts, mini five-a-side games or crossbar challenges. We even used to have things like the Cottage conundrum and t-shirts being fired into the crowd. All great events for the fans to partake in. I know we've had a couple of centre circle competitions this season, but that's it. Is it just yet another case of the club being out of touch with the fans and taking the easy option? Maybe it's just me and everyone loves the halftime interviews. And yes, there's a time and place for them, but maybe nice to have the variety. Thoughts? Keep up the amazing work from Toby. I mean, you spent your entire halftimes in the concourse, so this is very irrelevant to you, but I normally can't be bothered. So I mean, yeah, as you think. I
really enjoyed the interview at half time in the Spurs game with Yusuf. But I thought it was excellent. And I thought that was a really nice one. I actually agree. I tend to agree that I don't think it should be an interview every single time. But that one I thought was a perfect level of someone who is doing incredibly well for themselves within their own profession, in this case boxing, and actually, who cares and loves the club and actually is a full-time fan. I was like, that's a great interview. It's a perfect person to have on at half-time. But I do agree with the general point that, yeah, a lot of the time that feels like the easy way out. This was an exceptionally good variation on what has become quite a stale theme. And we used to have so much. They used to remember the hoops. They used to hang through the goal, and people used to try and shoot through the hoops. That was
we used
fun.
to have cheerleaders.
The Cravenettes. About the Cravenettes. Yeah, I mean, I feel like they could probably mix it up. I don't know how much people care, and I don't know how. I don't really, because I tend to go down to the river and have a pint in that kind of nice bit now by the riverside.
Bloody legend.
Yeah, well, you know how it is. But I like that. I like the fact maybe me and my brother go and chat about the game for 15 minutes over a pint. That's a nice bit that we have. But so I can't speak for. I can't sit here and be like, oh yeah, I'd love to see it, because ultimately I don't really see it anyway. But I did like the Cottage conundrum. They should bring that back. That was class.
I think it's sometimes the problem with interviews is that it's just hard to hear.
Well, yeah. Also, why can't we sort out the PA system?
I think the PA system is better. I think it is. You can physically listen to it. It's not like and but I just think it's not necessarily the setting where, I mean, sometimes I think it's best when they then post them online after the game, and then you're like, oh, that was interesting. I agree with you. I don't think it's like completely the worst thing at the end of the world, but I don't know. I've always just been like, with football, keep it simple. Stop trying to be fancy. Just get a couple of kids and do a penalty shootout.
Get Billy the Badger back in goal.
Hit the crossbar. All the good stuff. That's it for me. I enjoy when it is the hit the centre circle prize or whatever, or get the ball as close to the halfway line. It doesn't need to be that complicated. I also don't think it's that deep, but sometimes, I mean, I think for me, sometimes the Forever Fulham Award, I think it's amazing when you sometimes, they're all legends of the club, whoever it is, and it is always nice to see them have their moments, but it is sometimes just hard to hear. Is I think the problem. It's not always the setting for it, but yeah, I agree, Toby. It's sometimes it could be changed.
They could do more, but this is kind of low down on my list of issues I have with the club.
Yeah. I guess that is the one. Right, we will leave it there then for today. What a big one it is on Saturday, 12:15. If you're not going, I think it's on ITV. But if you are going, obviously Craven Cottage is the place to be on Saturday. Oh God. I'm just now the pod's ending. I'm like, now all there is to do is
again. Yep.
Now all there is to do is to get on with the game. As I mentioned earlier, make sure you check out Elizabeth's preview, which is with Dee from the Back of the Nest podcast, with Palace perspective on things. If you're just searching out more about this game and craving it, then head over to the Fulhamish YouTube. There's also a Jack and Joe show on there as well. But Jack, see you on the other side next week.
Yeah, see you on the other side.
I'm actually hosting the post-match pod as well, so I'm doing
You've got your work cut out for you, but we'll dissect it in all its either glory or despair over the course of next week.
Yeah, so the main podcast will be back on Monday, and also we'll be looking ahead to Arsenal. It doesn't stop from here, so have a great weekend. Fingers crossed it's a magic one in the FA Cup. You Whites.
You Whites!